The automatic glass doors hissed open with sterile efficiency, releasing a burst of cool, conditioned air into the humid Los Angeles night. David Black stepped inside the marble atrium of the Levantra Grand Hotel. His sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished floor. Black leather, designer, but casual. He carried no entourage, no luggage but a sleek carry-on. No flash, no arrogance. Just a quiet presence. A man who had earned his calm. The lobby was curated elegance. Arched ceilings, golden sconces. A chandelier shaped like a deconstructed star. A grand piano idled in the corner. The receptionist didn't look up right away. David approached the front desk with an ease born of 1,000 check-ins across 1,000 cities. He'd just closed a 9-figure deal over breakfast in Zurich. The contract was still warm in his email inbox. But he wasn't here for celebration. Just a place to sleep, shower, and think. "Good evening," he said, voice steady. The clerk finally looked up. Young, white, hair parted with machine precision. Name tag, Calvin. His eyes flicked to David's shoes, then to his face, then back again. A microsecond pause. "Yes?" Calvin said, slowly. David offered a small smile. "David Black. Reservation under Black. Presidential suite." Calvin blinked, fingers hesitating above the keyboard. "I see." David watched the hesitation, familiar like an old scar. He didn't flinch, didn't speak. He let Calvin fill the silence. "It looks like the suite is no longer available," Calvin said without meeting his eyes. "That's strange," David replied softly. "It was confirmed this morning. I have the email." He pulled out his phone, tapping a few times, and turned the screen toward Calvin. The young man leaned forward slightly, then pulled back. "Yes, I see the confirmation, but we've had an unexpected issue. Plumbing," he said quickly. "We'll need to downgrade you to a standard room." David studied him, the tightness around the mouth, the way Calvin reached for a laminated sheet with apology policies on it before David had even replied. This wasn't about plumbing. "I'd like to speak with the manager," David said calmly. Calvin stiffened. "He's unavailable at the moment. If you'd like to wait." "I'm not asking if he's available," David said, voice quiet but sharp. "I'm requesting a manager." Behind him, a couple stepped up to the desk. White, affluent, laughing. The woman wore pearls. The man, a suit without a tie. They looked over at David, then away, impatient. Calvin smiled at them. "Just one moment," he said brightly. Then to David, the warmth drained again. "Sir, please step aside so I can help the next guest." David turned slightly, eyes catching the reflection of himself in the mirrored column nearby. Tall, composed, black. The couple didn't wait. "Reservation under Mitchell," the man said. Calvin lit up. "Ah yes, Mr. Mitchell. You'll be in the King Deluxe on the top floor. We've upgraded you for the inconvenience of traffic on the entry ramp tonight." David heard every word. He turned back. "I see," he said. "No plumbing issue there?" Calvin blinked, caught. "It's a different wing," he mumbled. David nodded once, slowly. "I'll wait," he said. He stepped back, not to the plush armchairs but just to the side, where guests stood before being acknowledged. 10 minutes passed. 15. He was still waiting. His fingers curled lightly around the handle of his carry-on. His eyes didn't move, but inside his chest, something had begun to stir. Quiet and ancient. The concierge, a woman in her 40s with a clipped accent, glanced over. Her lips pressed into a tight line. She said nothing. David's phone vibrated in his pocket. A name on the screen, Elijah. He answered with one word. "Now." "Now," came the voice on the other end, steady, controlled. "You want it done?" David exhaled. "Yes." He hung up. Behind him, the piano player struck the opening chords of Summertime. Smooth, almost mocking. David turned his gaze back to the desk. His reflection looked back at him. And this time it was smiling. The soft jazz from the piano drifted across the lobby like perfume. Expensive, disorienting. David stood motionless near the polished pillar, its golden accents gleaming under the downlight. His reflection stared back at him, a quiet silhouette in a room built to erase people like him. Behind the front desk, Calvin whispered to a colleague. Their heads leaned in, their glances flicked toward David, then away. Each movement practiced, mechanical. David stepped forward. "Any update on the suite?" he asked, voice low, polite. Calvin straightened his tie. "As I said, sir, due to a maintenance complication, your assigned room isn't available. And the King Deluxe you gave the Mitchells? That was a different reservation class. I booked the presidential suite. There's nothing above that class." Calvin smiled, that corporate hollow smile that said everything and nothing. "It's hotel policy, sir. We reserve the right to modify accommodations in the event of unforeseen circumstances." David's fingers tapped once against the granite counter. "Policy," he repeated. "Show me the policy." "I'm afraid I can't give you internal documentation," Calvin replied. "But I can assure you it's standard." "You've used that word a lot," David said. "Standard, policy, complication. You ever say truth around here?" The words didn't rise in volume, but something in the tone made Calvin pause. He looked down, then back up with a fresh coat of courtesy. "I understand your frustration." "No, you don't," David interrupted. "You understand how to manage me. There's a difference." A soft shuffle of shoes behind him. Another guest, a middle-aged man in golf attire, red-faced from drink or sun, or both. "I just need a quick check-in," the man said to Calvin, who nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mr. Hanover. Welcome back." Calvin typed rapidly, voice bright and fluid. "Your usual suite is ready. We've stocked the bar with that Irish whiskey you requested. Complimentary." David blinked slowly. Hanover looked him over, then muttered under his breath, "Guess they'll let anyone stand around and hear these days." David's jaw flexed. Calvin didn't flinch. He heard it. He said nothing. As Hanover walked off with his keycard, David leaned in slightly. "You hear that?" Calvin tilted his head. "Hear what?" David gave a tight nod. "Exactly." Silence stretched like a cable between them. The concierge, Hannah, finally approached, clipboard in hand, face unreadable. "Sir, we can offer you a standard executive room tonight. We'll comp the minibar and—" David turned to her. "Do you know who I am?" A flicker of hesitation. "Your name is David Black." "That's not what I asked." She inhaled, then faltered. "I don't believe I do." David's phone vibrated. One buzz, then another. He didn't check it. "Then go find someone who does." He stepped back again, but not to wait. This time he was calculating. Somewhere deep inside, an engine had started. The kind that doesn't just run, it burns. David didn't return to the marble counter. He moved toward a quiet corner of the lobby, next to a towering abstract sculpture, all sharp edges and empty space. A symbol, maybe, of something beautiful designed never to welcome anyone in. He lowered into a single leather chair, sleek and cold. The phone in his hand buzzed again. He unlocked it without looking. The screen glowed. "Elijah." He tapped once. "Talk to me," came the voice on the other end. "They denied the room," David said evenly. A pause. "Did they say why?" "Plumbing." "Bullshit." "I know." Elijah exhaled through the line. "Want me to move now?" "Wait," David said, eyes fixed on nothing. "Not yet." Somewhere behind the desk, Calvin chuckled with another staffer. Laughter floated, then vanished, like the way people smile at the wrong jokes in elevators. David could feel their glances, the practiced way people check if they're being watched without appearing to look. He let the phone fall into his lap. His gaze dropped to the marble floor, gray veins slicing through white, polished to a mirror shine. And just like that, memory bled in like water beneath a door. 12 years old. A field trip to a museum in D.C. The tour guide had asked the group a question about Frederick Douglass. David answered, voice full of pride. "That's a big thought for someone like you," the guide had said. Laughter followed. His teacher did nothing. David's fingers curled slightly on the armrest. 15. Walking home in the suburbs after dark. Police cruiser slowed. Window down. Where you headed, champ? I live 2 blocks up. Mind showing us your key? He showed them. They still followed until he stepped inside. A bead of sweat traced his spine. Not from heat. From remembering too much. The soft ding of the elevator snapped him back. A bellman wheeled past, nodding politely to an elderly white couple. The woman clutched her bag just slightly tighter when she saw David. Even from 10 feet away, he stood again. His body moved before his mind did. He approached the front desk. Calvin noticed but said nothing. David placed both palms on the counter, slow and steady. He didn't raise his voice. I'm giving you a chance to rethink this. Calvin's lips twitched. Sir, as I said. I know what you said. David cut in. But here's what I'm saying. In less than 10 minutes, someone will walk through that door who does know who I am. When that happens, this place will shift. Calvin hesitated. Is that a threat? No, David said, almost smiling. That's a forecast. He turned and walked back to the chair. Not because he was done, but because he was building something. Layer by layer. Like a man stacking quiet bricks into a wall no one saw coming. Hannah, the concierge, spoke softly to a colleague. Their eyes flicked toward David. Their voices hushed like wind through dry leaves. The manager was still unavailable. David checked his watch. 9 minutes. One more. Then everything would begin. 10 minutes came and went. No manager. No explanation. No apology. The hotel hummed on without him. Suitcases wheeled past. Phones buzzed. Champagne glasses clinked in the lobby bar. A manufactured world of hospitality where David Black remained invisible. He stood again, not out of impatience but instinct. The body knows when it's not wanted, even when the words are polite. A new staff member approached. Young, black, nervous. She wore the hotel's deep green blazer like a costume. Her name tag crooked. Jasmine. Sir, she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder. I just wanted to say, I'm not supposed to, but David turned to her, his expression calm. Say what? They're not gonna give you the room, she whispered. They're just waiting you out. His jaw stayed still, but something in his eyes cracked. Just a hairline fracture. Jasmine swallowed. I heard Calvin say you could maybe try the Bayway Inn. There's 2 exits down. Not fancy, but... David blinked, slow and deliberate. Did he tell you to say that? She hesitated. No. I just thought it might be easier. Easier. The word landed like gravel in his throat. He nodded once. Thanks for your honesty. She looked down. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, he said. That's the worst part. He stepped outside. The doors parted without resistance. More than he could say for the people inside. Cold air slapped his skin, biting through the thin cotton of his button-up. Downtown lights shimmered against the wet pavement, each reflection trembling slightly, like they were afraid to hold their shape. David walked past the line of black SUVs idling in the valet zone. His own driver hadn't arrived yet. He didn't call him. He stood there, under the glow of a flickering street lamp, breath fogging in the night air. Around him, the city carried on. Horns in the distance, laughter from a rooftop bar, a siren wailing somewhere far off, urgent, but not for him. The cold reached deeper than his bones, curled around old memories, less visible wounds. There was something about being told to go somewhere easier, somewhere more appropriate. It wasn't the insult itself, it was the 1,000 that came before it. The ones that were shrugged off, laughed off, endured. 1,000 paper cuts beneath a tailored shirt. David looked up at the glowing Levanter sign. Grand in name, small in dignity. He pulled out his phone again. A paused message sat on the screen. Elijah's voice mid-sentence. If you're ready, we move. No hesitation. He hit play. I'm ready, David whispered, not to the phone, but to himself. Resolve didn't erupt. It formed, quietly, like steel cooling in the cold. He turned back toward the glass doors. And as he stepped forward, inside the lobby, Jasmine was gone. But Calvin was still there, still smiling. The revolving door spun once more behind David as he re-entered the lobby. This time, his steps were slower, measured. Not the walk of a guest seeking resolution, but of a man who had already decided it would never come from here. Calvin glanced up from his terminal, and for a fraction of a second, a flicker of discomfort passed through his eyes. Maybe it was David's posture, or the way he didn't pause at the desk this time. David crossed to a quiet alcove near the elevator bay. Beneath a gold-framed painting of a coastline he doubted the artist had ever seen. He lowered himself onto a velvet bench. The lobby's warmth pressed against his skin, but it didn't touch the chill inside him. He pulled out his phone. One ring. Two. Elijah. Already heard. Came the voice on the other end, cool, grounded, the kind of voice that never needed to shout. They really sent you to the curb? David didn't answer directly. Still no manager. Still being processed. A beat of silence. Then, you want to do this now? You still have the papers? Of course I do. I knew this day would come. David exhaled. Then start it. I'll need your signature in the next hour. Remote docs coming. The wires pre-cleared. You sure? D. I was born ready, David said, eyes never leaving the front desk. Let's make it official. From across the room, Calvin laughed again at something on his screen. Elijah's voice sharpened. Make them say your name, properly, for once. David smiled faintly. Damn right. As the call ended, a hotel guest passed in front of him. White, early 30s, designer luggage in tow. She caught sight of David seated alone, did a quick scan of his clothes, and clutched her purse a little tighter. A flick of hesitation in her gait. Then she moved on. It was so familiar, so mundane, it almost made him laugh. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and opened the document Elijah had just sent. The screen lit up with the title, Levantra Grand Hotel, Asset Transfer Proposal. His thumb hovered over the signature box. Behind the desk, a new voice emerged. A woman's. Calvin, you told me Suite 17A was booked out due to maintenance. David's eyes flicked upward. The woman was tall, mid-50s, Latina, poised. Her tone wasn't angry, but something in it hinted at executive authority. I just sent the newlyweds up there, Calvin said, fumbling. Thought we cleared it. You cleared it? She echoed. I specifically said not to touch the upper-tier suites until... David stood. The woman noticed him. Her eyes locked on his, and in that moment, something shifted. He walked toward the desk. I'd like to be addressed properly now, he said calmly. Calvin blinked. Excuse me? David didn't flinch. Call me Mr. Black. The woman stepped forward. I'm Assistant GM Reyes. Is there an issue, sir? He turned toward her, voice steady, eyes cutting through veneer. Yes, but not for much longer. Behind his back, his phone vibrated again. Wire confirmed. Signatures processed. Transition initiated. David met Rhea's gaze. I think your GM will want to meet me now. A low chime echoed as the conference room door locked behind David. The walls were matte slate, the table polished oak, and a giant screen flickered to life at the head of the room. Someone had dimmed the lights, perhaps out of protocol or maybe to keep things professional, impersonal. Cold. Assistant GM Reyes had offered coffee. David declined. He stood with his back straight, arms loosely at his sides. He didn't sit. Not yet. On screen, a middle-aged white man appeared, silver hair, charcoal suit, and a smile that tried too hard. Mr. Black, the man began. I'm Paul Langford, Regional Operations Manager. I understand there's been a situation. David let the silence stretch before responding. That's one word for it. I want to personally apologize for any miscommunication or inconvenience you experienced, Langford said, performing the script with the smoothness of someone who'd done it before. We take allegations of discrimination seriously. I haven't made any allegations yet, David interrupted. But I will. Langford blinked. His fingers paused on his keyboard. David moved to the head of the table, placing his phone beside the conference mic. You'll want to listen carefully. This call is being recorded for legal transparency. Langford shifted slightly. The charm thinned. David pressed a button. A new window popped open beside the Zoom feed. An executive dossier. Preloaded. The Levantra Grand Hotel's financials. Deeds. Pending transfer. I'm not here to lodge a complaint, David said. I'm here to introduce myself as your newest acquisition partner. Langford froze. David continued. Your parent group received a blind offer 2 weeks ago. Silent Capital. Anonymous holding company. Fast-tracked by your board because the numbers were too good to ignore. Langford's mouth opened, then closed. David leaned in. You've been entertaining a ghost buyer. That ghost is me. The screen flickered as Langford scrolled through his own back end. His eyes darted line to line. Then stillness. You're the controlling shareholder as of this morning, David finished. With final authority pending procedural review, which, if your legal team moves as fast as mine, will finalize in under 48 hours. Langford sat back in his chair. The image stuttered slightly as the connection caught up with the tension in the room. I see, he said, though clearly he hadn't. Not fully. Not yet. David's voice dropped just above a whisper. You employ people who denied me dignity because I didn't look like a man who belongs. I didn't come here to punish. I came to make sure no one else has to shrink themselves in this lobby again. Langford glanced off-screen, perhaps at a colleague, perhaps at his own reflection. You have full intent to proceed? David nodded. Contracts are signed. Wire is confirmed. PR rollout is your next step, but don't worry. I'll write the message. Langford swallowed. And the current staff? I'm not here to burn the place down, David said. But I am here to make sure it never runs the same. He tapped a final key on his phone. The screen beside the Zoom window lit up with a draft email. Subject: Operational Transition Ownership Change at Levantra Grand Center. David Black, majority owner. Langford took a deep breath. I'll coordinate with legal, he murmured. David nodded once. You do that. He ended the call. For the first time, he sat down. Outside the room, the lobby still buzzed like nothing had changed. But it had. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. David stepped out, no badge, no room key, no escort. Just presence. A presence that landed differently now. He walked across the same marble floor that had once reflected hesitation, now echoing certainty. The lobby hadn't changed, but everything inside it had. Power, when earned, doesn't need to be loud. Calvin was still behind the front desk, eyes fixed on a monitor. When he looked up and saw David approaching, his lips tightened like a man trying to swallow something bitter. Sir, he said curtly, if you're still waiting on management, I'm not, David said calmly. I've spoken to the regional office. I've taken the liberty of reviewing operations. You'll want to gather the full team now for an internal announcement. Calvin's brow furrowed. That's not protocol. David offered the smallest smile. It is now. Calvin opened his mouth, then shut it. Something in David's tone, composed, final, unsettled him. He turned and whispered to Hannah, the concierge, who glanced over, eyes widening slightly. Within minutes, hotel staff began to assemble in the lobby. Housekeeping in crisp whites, bellhops in forest green vests, front of house in navy. A few servers from the hotel restaurant drifted out, aprons still tied. David didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood near the grand piano, under a skylight streaked with the last blush of sunset. The same lobby that had treated him like a stranger now became his stage. I won't keep you long, he began, meeting each face one by one. This morning I was a guest, or at least I tried to be. A murmur. But I wasn't given that dignity. Not because of availability. Not because of error. Because someone here decided who I must be based on how I looked walking through those doors. He let the silence settle like dust in a beam of light. I've learned not to carry anger for that kind of small thinking. But I do carry responsibility, to stop it. Someone shifted. A bellhop cleared his throat. Hannah looked down. David's voice remained level. 10 minutes ago, your ownership changed hands. Effective immediately, I'm the majority stakeholder of the Levantra Grand. The silence fractured. Eyes darted. Calvin's mouth parted slightly, confusion flooding in. Hannah looked up, stunned. I'm not here to fire anyone today, but things will change. Accountability will no longer be a slogan on a poster in the break room. You will treat every person who walks through those doors, regardless of color, clothes, or accent, as if they belong. Because they do. He turned toward Calvin. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for awareness. And that starts now. David reached into his jacket and retrieved a keycard. It gleamed silver under the lobby light. Presidential Suite, 17A etched in black on the surface. He held it up for everyone to see, then pocketed it. I'll be in my room, he said quietly. We meet in the boardroom at 9 a.m. sharp. All departments. Mandatory. He turned and began to walk away. Behind him, whispers swelled. Not mockery, not scorn, uncertainty. Then something rarer, respect. At the elevator, David paused. He didn't look back. But as the doors slid shut, Calvin was still standing there, no longer smirking, just watching. The boardroom buzzed with uneasy quiet. A sleek glass table stretched the length of the room, surrounded by employees dressed in stiff uniforms and tense expressions. Some shifted in their seats. Others sipped lukewarm coffee from branded paper cups. The walls were lined with abstract paintings, neutral enough to offend no one. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and unspoken questions. At the head of the room stood David. No podium, no slideshow, just him. He rested his palms on the table, his posture composed but not performative. His voice, when it came, was softer than expected. Let me tell you a story. A rustle moved through the room like wind through dry grass. It starts a few days after my 8th birthday. A teacher pulled me aside after class. I thought she was going to praise my essay on Harriet Tubman. Instead, she asked me if I really wrote it. Hannah's eyes lifted from the notepad she hadn't touched. Her lips parted slightly. David's gaze swept the room. In high school, I wore a hoodie into a department store. A security guard followed me from aisle to aisle. I smiled, asked if he needed something. He said, just making sure nothing goes missing. I had 2 scholarships in my backpack. A concierge assistant lowered her gaze. The bellhop from last night leaned forward, elbows on knees. In college, my roommate's parents asked to move him out when they saw me. Said it was nothing personal. Said they just weren't used to our kind. Someone exhaled. Not loudly, but audibly. I've sat in business class and had a flight attendant ask if I was in the wrong seat. I've walked into boardrooms and been asked to fetch coffee. I've signed contracts worth more than most of you will make in a lifetime, and still had hotel clerks decide I don't belong in a suite I paid for. His voice trembled just once, but he didn't stop. I tell you this not because I want sympathy. I want clarity. He let the words settle. You all saw what happened yesterday, and most of you stayed silent. Not because you're bad people, but because you've been taught silence is safer than correction. Calvin stared at the floor. I'm not angry, David continued. Anger is easy. I'm tired. And I'm ready. He paused. The kind of pause that makes a room hold its breath. I bought this hotel because I was denied a key. But this is bigger than me. Hannah blinked hard. Her fingers trembled on the edge of her notepad. You don't change a culture by shaming people. You change it by showing them what it cost. He stepped back from the table. No one will be fired today, but tomorrow you'll meet with equity trainers. You'll listen to people you don't usually hear. And by the end of this quarter, every single employee will be evaluated not just on performance, but on empathy. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and placed it on the table. It read, Human Dignity Clause, effective immediately. I want people to walk into this place and feel safe, respected, seen. And if that makes you uncomfortable, this isn't your hotel anymore. A beat. Then Hannah, voice barely audible. Thank you, Mr. Black. David looked at her and smiled, just once. But it held everything. The announcement went out by noon. Printed memos on crisp letterhead. Digital copies in inboxes with high-priority flags. A notice on the staff app. Mandatory policy changes, effective immediately. But it wasn't just policy. It was culture rewritten from the inside out. David stood in the operations office with Reyes and the department heads. No one sat. No one smiled. The air felt like a held breath. He glanced at the whiteboard behind them. Rows of shift schedules, erased and redrawn a dozen times, trying to keep the machine turning. I'm not interested in PR, David said. This isn't a headline. It's a foundation. Reyes nodded slowly, her eyes alert. There was something deeper than duty in her, maybe understanding, maybe guilt. One of the heads, an older man with a gold badge that read Director of Guest Services, cleared his throat. You're saying we're keeping all current employees? For now, David answered. No one's being terminated today. But moving forward, we hold people accountable for the how, not just the what. He placed a folder on the center desk. This is the Dignity Protocol. Read it, learn it, then live it. Inside, pages outlined 3 key initiatives. 1. Racial bias and empathy training monthly sessions. Not the PowerPoint kind. Immersive, peer-led, and required for everyone, from janitors to executives. 2. Profit-sharing program frontline workers, housekeeping, kitchen, bellhops, would receive quarterly bonuses tied to guest satisfaction and inclusion ratings. Because equity means more when it's measurable. 3. Zero-tolerance discrimination clause. Any employee found participating in, encouraging, or ignoring discriminatory behavior would be placed under review by an independent ethics board. Calvin wasn't in the room, but his name hung there like smoke. You really expect this place to change? One of the managers asked, skeptical. It's been running the same way for decades. David met his gaze. So did plantations. Then one day they didn't. A silence stretched. I'm not naive, David continued. This won't fix everything. But systems shape behavior. And when the system says disrespect costs you, people listen. He walked toward the window. Outside, the city pulsed. Horns, crosswalk beeps, the distant howl of an ambulance. Life didn't pause for justice. It never had. Let me be clear, he said, turning back. This isn't just about race. It's about respect. You treat the cleaners like the VIPs, and you treat the VIPs like humans. No more invisible workers. No more invisible pain. Reyes finally spoke. And if someone refuses, they find another lobby to work in. A murmur rippled across the room. Not resistance, reckoning. Later that evening, signs began to change. The employee lounge now held a poster, "People first, always." Below it, a photo of a housekeeper named Estella smiling with her teenage son. She'd worked here for 12 years. No one had ever asked her name before. David watched from the mezzanine as staff moved through the lobby. Some nodded at him now. Others avoided eye contact. He didn't care. Change wasn't about being liked. It was about being undeniable. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Elijah. Interview request from CNN. Want it? David stared down at the lobby one last time. No, he muttered. We don't need cameras to prove we're right. He turned, walked toward the elevator, and pressed the button. Behind him, the Levantra Grand was beginning, finally, to feel worthy of its name. The door clicked open with a quiet chime. David stepped into the presidential suite, room 17A. The same one Calvin had denied him. The same one the system had tried to quietly reserve for someone else. Now, it belonged to no one but him. Muted lamplight warmed the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline in glass and gold. A decanter of bourbon rested untouched on the marble credenza. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and polished wood, wealth, curated and sterile. He didn't sit. He walked slowly toward the window, one hand brushing the edge of the leather sofa as he passed. The city stretched before him in silent witness. Traffic lights blinked below. Helicopters buzzed in the distance. Far-off sirens cried for someone else's emergency. He stood there for a long time, back straight, hands in his pockets. Not triumphant, not angry, just still. Because even in victory, there's residue. A heaviness no penthouse can erase. The same floor that once rejected him now welcomed him with chilled air and luxury slippers. But the weight of that earlier moment, the humiliation in front of strangers, the sharp sting of being deemed less than, it lingered, not because it still hurt, but because it always had. He exhaled, slow and quiet, the kind of breath that lives somewhere deeper than lungs, the kind born from years of being the only black man in the room, from hearing the pauses after introducing himself, from watching smiles shift when the last name didn't match the expectation. His phone buzzed on the glass table behind him. He didn't turn right away. Outside, a billboard flashed, Levantra Grand, luxury without limits. He almost laughed. Eventually, he picked up the phone. A single text from Elijah. Another hotel chain just offered to sell. Downtown Atlanta. Board wants to talk tomorrow. David stared at the screen. He set the phone down, walked to the edge of the suite's window again, and whispered, more to the city than to himself. Let them. In the reflection, the chandelier above him shimmered like a crown he never asked for but earned anyway. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the room key, the one they told him didn't exist, ran his thumb along the etched letters. 17A. Then he set it on the windowsill. Outside, the city pulsed, the same as before. But tonight, it belonged to him in a way it never had. The camera would pull back now. Slow. Cinematic. Leaving him silhouetted against the skyline. Not because the fight was over, but because this was only chapter 1.